Hello, friends. Good morning and welcome. What is that? To another episode of PB Reads the Bible. We are on episode 3 on our journey through the book of Judges. And so today we're finally, I know you're going to say that, oh, finally, it's about time. We're actually going to read a story about a couple of the judges as we are into chapter 3. So good to have you with me this morning. Some of you, if you're joining for the first time, welcome, welcome. I would say, on one hand, I would say you haven't missed much. On the other hand, I'd say you missed quite a bit. So you're welcome to stay and join us for this episode as we talk about the judges. And then later on, maybe you want to go back and watch the first 2 episodes of this so that you can catch some of the background from the first 2 chapters. Which actually 2 chapters plus 6 verses, because we're going to start today on chapter 3, verse 7. The first 6 verses of chapter 3 kind of really belong to chapter 2. They connect in, they finish up the introduction, so to speak. But anyway, welcome to one and all. I know some of you folks are joining me live. Great to have you joining me live. Some of you are not. Some of you are watching in a recording some other time today, tomorrow, next week, next month, whatever it is. Great to have you doing that as well. I'm so glad and so proud and pleased that this congregation is willing to support this kind of a ministry and being able to do this kind of a thing online. And I'm so pleased and proud and humbled that so many of you have been joining me on our journey through all of these lessons. Some of you have been doing it right from the beginning, December 1st of 2020, and others have joined at other times along the way. But both cases, I'm just humbled that you found it worthwhile, that you keep tuning in, and you keep asking me what's next, and you're supporting me and encouraging me along the way, and it's just awesome. It's just awesome. So thank you. So go ahead and check in, whether you're live or whether you're watching this live or watching it in a recording. Go ahead and check in and let me know that you're there, because I see numbers, but I like to know who those people actually are. I don't keep track. You don't get a check mark or a good mark or a bad mark. You don't get demerits by not being here or anything like that. I just like to know. I'm curious. I also want to know if you have questions or comments, so you can put those in the stream. You can also send me a text on either of those things. If you want to just check in through texting, you can do that as well. Maybe you have a situation where you can't do it online. So 570-351-1619. That's awesome. Good morning, Cheryl. We got a couple people checking in. Good morning, Cheryl. Okay, can be found in PB Reads, including yesterday's reference to Samson. Oh, well, cool. I'm glad. See, and they didn't pay me for that information. Oh, cool. Well, good morning, Cheryl. Good morning, Marilyn. Good morning, Lisa. Good to have you with us this morning as well. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, I am truly humbled that God is using me in this way, because that's what I believe is happening. I believe that God is using me. Otherwise, you wouldn't find it worthwhile to keep coming back. So God's saying something to you. Excuse me. I've been trying to cut down on caffeine, but this morning I needed the extra cup. So where were we? You know what? It's Wednesday. Usually Wednesday-ish, I start talking about announcements. So we'll talk about Sunday. Sunday will be worship, of course. We have our 2 worship experiences. Both will be in person, 8:15 and 10:45. The 10:45 will also be live streamed, Facebook, YouTube, and website. So if you can't make it in person, we'd love to have you in person for either of those services, worship experiences. But if you can't make it, just join us online. We'd love to have you that way as well. Good morning, hun. If you're joining online, I encourage you to create a sacred space for yourself. Surround yourself with things that help you truly get engaged in worship and that truly help you set the mood for yourself. Things that you're going to find useful. A cross, it can be handy if you've got a small cross that you can set on a little table, a candle or two or a dozen. If that helps you, that's great. A Bible is always a useful thing to have, or a Bible app on your electronic device that you can also access while watching the stream. A notepad or pen, paper, or something like that to take notes, because you never know. God might speak to you. That's my prayer every week, that God will. So go ahead and do that. Oh, good morning, Kelsey. And good morning, John. Good morning, John. Also, that's it for announcements. So just talk about Sunday worship. Oh, which we will be continuing our look at our intensive look at the Lord's Prayer. This will be week 3 on our journey through the Lord's Prayer, and we'll be looking at "Give us this day our daily bread," and "Forgive us as we forgive those who trespass against us." Those two, that section of the prayer. I know I didn't say it word for word. You get the point. We'll talk about that section this week. That's going to be our focus. Prayers. Since we're talking about prayers, we can always use this as a way to keep each other surrounded in prayer. So you can share things on here. I will give you 2 updates. One, Brother Ron, I mentioned yesterday, he had a couple different concerns. Thank you for your prayers. The doctor thinks, as far as his blood pressure, doctor doesn't think it's because of nerves or anxiety or worry over his car accident. And he said they had taken him off of blood pressure medicine prior to his surgery, and the doctor said, you need to go back on it. So that should help. So we anticipate seeing a turnaround in his blood pressure in the next couple of days. And he also got some good news from the insurance agents and working out that whole thing with the car accident. The other person claimed responsibility. Yay. I should say they admitted responsibility. So that's good. That's all going to be taken care of. He does still have worry about it. My brother tends to be a worrier. We know that, Ron. Calm down. And Jesus gave a commandment: do not worry. That was not a suggestion on his part. Don't worry. It's easy to say, though. It's easy to say, not always easy to do. I get that. And the other update was on Mildred West, which I mentioned yesterday. Shirley Kohler's mom, almost 100 years old. She'll be 100 in July. She had fallen and broken a bone. Turns out it was her leg. I was right, it was her leg, just above a knee that she had repaired. Initially, they were thinking they're not going to want to bother doing surgery since she's almost 100. Well, they are going to do surgery and replace her knee replacement today at 10 o'clock in Arizona. So that'd be noontime here. So noontime here, if you could keep Mildred and surgery team and all that kind of stuff in your prayers, we'd appreciate that. Okay, enough of that. I see we have more folks joining as well. Awesome. So we're going to jump into the stories now about individual judges. Excuse me. There are 12 judges that are going to be talked about throughout this book. And it's kind of interesting. They refer to some of them, when I say they, Bible scholars, whatever, commentaries, we'll talk about 6 major judges and 6 minor judges. What's the difference? Basically, kind of like the prophets, they talk about the major prophets and the minor prophets, and you might have heard me mention that. Major prophet is one that's a larger section, and the minor prophets tend to only be a couple chapters long. And it's kind of the same thing. The major judges have a full story. The minor judges might only be a couple verses, just briefly mentioned in passing, almost. Same thing happens with some of the kings when you get through, when you get into First and Second Kings, when they're talking about all the kings after David and Solomon. Some of them are a full chapter or more, and others are just a couple of verses long. Might have to do with how long their reigns were or what they did that was or was not important. So the same thing takes place with these. and it's interesting. It's interesting. The author put them together in a pattern and in a particular order. He doesn't go with all the majors and then all the minors. He doesn't go with all the minors and then all the majors. He starts with the majors and then he throws in a minor or two. And then he goes back to the majors. And then he goes back to the minors, and then he goes back to the majors. He goes in that pattern. We can see that when he uses a minor, we can see that it kind of delineates, it differentiates, and it points out the downward trajectory of the judges, starting with the best judge, we might say, the ideal judge, and then progressively getting down. And the same thing happens with the minor prophets, and we can see that as well. They mirror each other. In when the minors come in, it points out the next ones are going to be worse. The next ones are going to be worse. So let's begin our look at some of the judges, starting with the model judge. The model judge. Oh, good morning, Marcia. Almost missed that. Good to have you with us this morning as well. All right, so we will look at Othniel, the model judge, and this is chapter 3, verses 7 through 11. Now, Othniel has already been mentioned. He was mentioned back in chapter 1, but so, excuse me, he is the same person. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, forgetting Yahweh their God and worshiping the Baals and the Asherahs. Therefore, the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Israel, and he sold them into the hand of King Cushan-Rishathaim of Aram-Naharaim. And the Israelites served Cushan-Rishathaim 8 years. But when the Israelites cried out to Yahweh, Yahweh raised up a deliverer for the Israelites, who delivered them, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother. The spirit of Yahweh came upon him, and he judged Israel. He went out to war, and Yahweh gave King Cushan-Rishathaim of Aram into his hand, and his hand prevailed over Cushan-Rishathaim. So the land had rest 40 years. Then Othniel, son of Kenaz, died. Pause. Now that Cushan-Rishathaim in Hebrew means Kuzan of double wickedness. So he's like an extra wicked person, it would describe him. Villainous and perhaps satirical royal name. Now, we don't have any, there's no historical record of that person ever actually existing. But so we don't know if he really did or not, but and that might have been just a nickname even for the guy, but that it seems like he was pretty nasty. Was pretty nasty. And the place name Aram Naharaim means Aram of the two rivers, and that would refer to northwestern Mesopotamia, the northwestern Mesopotamian river area. So we've got Othniel raised up. Now, here we go again. The people, the Israelites cried out to Yahweh. And yes, we can. I mean, it sounds like they're crying out to Yahweh, but there's not an indication of repentance. It's just their groaning. Their groaning moves God to pity. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. God is moved to pity by the groaning of the oppressed, even when they don't deserve help. Even when they don't deserve help. And there's a key phrase in here that's going to be used a couple times throughout Judges with differing impact. And that phrase is the spirit of Yahweh. So the spirit of Yahweh came upon Othniel, and he judged Israel, and he went out to war, and he was successful. His hand prevailed, etc., etc. So the spirit of the Lord, the spirit of Yahweh, came upon him and empowered him, and he used that power for good things. Okay, Now, the Spirit of God does empower, but the Spirit of God does not guarantee that what you do with it is going to be good. We're going to see that in a couple other places. When the Spirit of Yahweh comes upon someone, and I guess I would say they pervert the use of that power from God. They twist it, and they're not as successful as an Othniel. Othniel is certainly being lifted up in this story as being a righteous person, a godly person, and a very successful judge. And he ruled over the land. The land had rest for 40 years. And again, if you've followed with me before, 40 doesn't necessarily mean 40. It means a long time, a long time. Now, the numbers, and it's not a rock solid thing, because we're going to see the next one is the rest is for a longer period of time. But generally speaking, that number is going to be going down with each judge. And why? To symbolize, to be emblematic of the fact that they're not as successful, that the judges aren't as pure and as dedicated to God as the first ones were. To one more way to point that downward spiral of Israel, that each time that they are delivered, the time of peace and security and rest is shrinking. Shrinking. That's not a hard fast rule, because you're going to see in the next, I think it's the next one, that it's longer period of time. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about that guy. That's enough to say about that guy. It's only a few verses long. Now, the next character. This is interesting. This is interesting. This story of Ehud. Story of Ehud. This story has all kind of stuff in it. Great. It's a great story. It's got satire. It's got irony, at least to an extent. It's got wordplay taking place. All of which combined and strengthens the belief that this most likely was, as most of the stories were, an oral story, and it relies very heavily on that oral tradition. Excuse me, in creating it. Fortunately, much of that. Much of those aspects, the irony, the satire, etc., hold, even in written form. So I think I'm going to read the whole story of Ehud, and then we'll go back and look at it. Okay. I'm not going to read the last couple of verses about Shamgar. He's the first of the minor prophets, but we're going to read the first, the major portion of the story of Ehud, and then we'll go back, because it's a fun story to read. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and Yahweh strengthened King Eglon of Moab against Israel, because they had done what was evil in the sight of Yahweh. In alliance with the Ammonites and the Amalekites, he went and defeated Israel, and they took possession of the city of palms, Jericho. So the Israelites served King Eglon of Moab 18 years. But when the Israelites cried out to Yahweh, Yahweh raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. The Israelites sent tribute by him to King Eglon of Moab. Ehud made for himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he fastened it on his right thigh under his clothes. Then he presented the tribute to King Eglon of Moab. Now, Eglon was a very fat man. When Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent the people who carried the tribute on their way. But he himself turned back at the sculptured stones near Gilgal and said, "I have a secret message for you, O king." So the king said, "Silence!" And all his attendants went out from his presence. Ehud came to him while he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber and said, "I have a message from God for you." So he rose from his seat. Then Ehud reached with his left hand took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into Eglon's belly. The hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not draw the sword out of his belly, and the dirt came out. Then Ehud went out into the vestibule and closed the doors of the roof chamber on him and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came. When they saw the doors of the roof chamber were locked, they thought, he must be relieving himself in the cool chamber. So they waited until they were embarrassed. When he still did not open the doors of the roof chamber, they took the key and opened them. There was their lord lying dead on the floor. Ehud escaped while they delayed and passed beyond the sculptured stone and escaped to Seirah. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hill country. Having him at their head, he said to them, "Follow after me, for Yahweh has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand." So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites and allowed no one to cross over. At that time, they killed about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men. No one escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. Pause. I know there's only one verse left, but it's okay. Isn't that a great story? I think it's a cool story. And now you might be wondering, well, where's the satire? Where's the irony? Where's the wordplay and all that? Now we'll talk about all that because it's there. It's there. So we're going to go a little at a time through this. Yes, again, the people did what was wrong. And it doesn't specify, but we're left to think that, especially since it's the same things that they were doing before Othniel. In other words, worshiping the Baals and the Asherahs rather than worshiping the Lord. Doesn't say it this time. Sometimes it specifies what the wrongdoings of the people are. Here it doesn't, so we're just left to think. And we've got this king from Moab, King Eglon of Moab, and he defeated and he took possession of the city of palms, which is most likely, anyway, Jericho. That's kind of how it was. That's how it was usually referred to. Usually when it's city of palms, we're talking about Jericho. We don't always know for a fact some of these things. All right. So then we get Ehud, son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. So Ehud is left-handed. And right away, we're seeing some wordplay because he's the son of a Benjaminite, which really means son of a right-handed man. So he is the left-handed son of a right-handed man. So there's some interesting wordplay taking place. Now, what does it mean that he's left-handed? Some people think, some scholars say that, well, he must have been deformed with his right hand, or it wouldn't work, and so he had to use his left-handed. Others say he was just left-handed. Others say he was part of a particular warrior group, a particular group of soldiers who were trained to be ambidextrous and be able to fight with both hands. Let's just go with the simple answer. Let's go with the simple one, because I think sometimes simplest is best, and I think the simple one works very well for the story. He was left-handed. Now, I'm right-handed, but I'm not left-handed. But let's just go with the fact that he was left-handed. Now, most people aren't back then and still today. Most people aren't, but he was. And he made a sword, special sword, double-edged. There's a point there. Point to the sword. Now, it's important that it's a double-edged sword because this is wordplay. But he creates a double-edged sword that he straps to the inside of his right thigh. Since he's left-handed, not right-handed, but since most people are right-handed, you wouldn't think that the the subjects of the king would be allowed just regular entrance into the same place as the king without being searched, right? So since most people are right-handed, they would be looking on the outside for a sword, but not seeing one, they might pat down the left leg. They would not expect a weapon to be on the right thigh, hidden away on the right thigh, but he's left-handed, so it would work. That's important. That's important. And it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. Now, it describes him as being a very fat man, a very fat man. That's because of the rest of the story. That, other than that, probably doesn't mean much. Maybe it does. I don't know. What's important is, the next important thing is that he's there to present a tribute. Now, the context is of that word tribute. We might think that they're there to bring gold payment, taxes, and yeah, that's probably part of it. But it also has a ceremonial aspect, which definitely at the time would involve the killing of an animal, generally a fattened animal, for the gods. So that's brought into this. That's built into that aspect. That's taken place by the end of that passage. And now, when they're done with it, Ehud and his group starts to leave. When they get to the sculptured stones, when they get to the carved idols, outside the town, there would be these statues of their gods, Baal and Asherah, maybe, or something like that. The town's gods, the king's, the country's gods, whatever. So he gets to there. That's the point of demarcation, we might say. And he sends the rest away. He goes back. And he says, I have a secret message from you, for you, O king. Here's where the double-edged aspect comes in, because not only is his sword double-edged, his words are double-edged. His tongue is double-edged, because what we translate as word can also mean thing. He said, so I have a secret message for you, a secret word for you. I have a secret thing for you. And the king says silence. His servants think, okay, he wants to be left alone, so they leave him because of that. And Ehud was able to get a little closer while he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. So this is like, it's basically, that's what it is. It's up on the roof of the building, a little bit of open window openings up high to allow some air through. He says, I have a message from God for you. Could also be, I have a thing from God for you. Since it's a message from God, that's what Eglon hears. That's what Eglon hears, a message from God. He wants to hear it, and he stands up and draws even closer to Ehud. Otherwise, he's still farther away, but since he stood up and he's getting closer to Ehud, and leans right over, and as he's leaning over, Ehud pulls out his double-edged sword and sticks him in the belly, and the belly closes around the sword blade. And the dirt came out, is how the NRSV translates it. And it came out, he did not pull the sword, and the fact closed over it. The NIV kind of skips that a little bit, mostly because we don't really know what it means. There's different thoughts, different translations. Some even translate it as Ehud escaped through the king's toilet hole. Okay, he had a hole to relieve himself in, and that's how Ehud went out. But the NRSV translates it as the dirt came out. In other words, the contents of his colon came out when he was stabbed, and it closed around him. This makes sense when we get to I kind of like that translation, not just because it's funny, but because it impacts the understanding of the servants. It impacts the Ehud went out the vestibule. He went outside. He went out through the thing, locked the doors of the roof chamber on him, and locked them. Closed the doors, and locked them. After he had gone, the servants came. They saw that the doors were locked and thought he must be relieving himself in the cool chamber. In the cool chamber. Literally in Hebrew, the word is covering his feet, which is just a euphemism for going to the bathroom, because you would drop trow, so to speak, and cover your feet. It kind of makes sense, going back to the dirt came out, if it meant that the contents of his colon came out, as they would smell that and think, oh, he's relieving himself. Let's give him some time. But there waited so much time went by that they were embarrassed. So then they let themselves in and they find him dead. So there's that satire in there that they just think he's going to the bathroom. Meanwhile, he's lying there dead inside. Ehud escaped while they delayed and passed beyond the sculptured stones, beyond those stones, beyond the gods. In other words, he is now leaving Moab, and he's leaving it behind him, and leaving the gods behind him, going back to Israel. And notice what he says when he sounds the trumpet and gets everybody. He doesn't say anything about what he did. He doesn't say, hey, I did this amazing thing. He says, Yahweh has given your enemies over to you. He immediately gives all credit to Yahweh. So Othniel may be the model judge. Ehud's not far behind. He's pretty darn close to this model judge. He's what would be the right word? A little bit of, he's very sly and crafty, and he achieves this assassination through this intricate plot. But he gives all credit to God as soon as it's over, and then leads the people to victory because of God. And they have peace. The land had rest 80 years. Again, a very long time, very, very long time. And yes, this one is more than Othniel, which I said there's occasional spikes, but we'll see that the numbers trend downwards as part of that spiral downwards. Okay, this is the last verse, right? Yeah. Last verse of chapter 3. And we have the first minor prophet, Shamgar. He gets a full verse all to himself. After him came Shamgar, son of Anath, who killed 600 of the Philistines with an ox goad. He too delivered Israel. End of chapter. And what do you have to say about Shamgar? Well, not really a whole lot. I had to look up what an ox goad was because I didn't know. And best way to describe it is a cattle prod, kind of a cattle prod that they would use for herding oxen, for moving oxen along, for getting them to move. Now, so think of a wooden stick with a point on it. I probably should have saved the picture and shown it to you, but you can Google ox goad and click on images just to get a look at what one looks like. But think of a stick with a point on the end of it, and might also have a hook in a size. The hook would be to grab the collar of the yoke of the oxen to move them, to hold them back or to make them turn. But the pointy part would be to prod them along. An oxen's hide is pretty tough and all that kind of stuff, and you're only jabbing a little bit. But he used one of these to kill 600 Philistines. So he's a strong guy, tough guy, nasty guy. We're not told much about him. Now the name Shamgar and that Anath, they're not Hebrew names. They're not Hebrew names. So he probably wasn't Hebrew. He was just someone who came to their rescue. He came to be their deliverer. He was used by God, we would say, right? Even though it doesn't have that in there. He was used by God to be a deliverer for Israel, in spite of the fact that he himself apparently wasn't Hebrew. And he too delivered Israel. That's all we know about Shamgar. Well, friends, I do pray that this has been beneficial for you today, that you have, God has spoken to you in some way through something we've said or read, that you've learned something or relearned something that you have perhaps forgotten. That's been beneficial. That's been beneficial. As you go about your days, not just today, but every day, keep those eyes and ears, physical and spiritual, open to what God is doing, our active, living, loving God is doing in your life and the lives of those around you. When you see it, when you hear it, say, thank you, Papa, and then tell somebody about it, including me. I want to hear. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed.